let's talk about The Daughters of Midnight, Book 2 in Tales of Temeraire series, and the sequel to the first binding. Now, if you want to know what the first binding is about, go click on one of my previous videos. I explain why you should read it. It is incredible, it's amazing, I love the shit out of it. Now, if you're new here, I'm Ladymair. I spent most of my time screaming on the internet for people to read these books because I love them so fucking much. And this is definitely true for this series. It's a series that you need to take slowly. You need to marinate in the story. It's not something I think you can read in 2 weeks. I think it needs like a month to really digest and read the story, and that is how I did this. Because it's just the way it's told, the way R R Verdi delves deep into the prose, into Ari as a character, how he delves deep into story and where story came from, and learning everything and learning what it is, what a story is it alive, and what all of this that like brings things together is just amazing. And you just take it slowly, ingest it slowly, because otherwise I think you will burn yourself out. This is not a story you have to rush, definitely not. Now this is a big step up from the first binding. I enjoyed the first binding. I'm here for the revenge plot. I'm also a sucker for the main character retelling his story backwards to somebody else from like in the future, so he's like kind of 2 timelines. I'm a sucker for that, but especially with this one, he's not just telling his story back. There's something going on. There's a hint of something more. Like when we left off the first binding, something had happened to Ari in the present, and you're like, holy shit. And we start off from there, and you're like, how is he going to get himself out of this? And from the get-go, I was intrigued. Like, seeing Ari in the present also grow as a character, as well as seeing him grow as a character in the past, is massively done. Incredible. But Ari in the present, his storyline took on a higher turn. There was more going on, there was more political intrigue, there was more with the princes, and it was fascinating. Then there was, I should have seen this coming, I should have, but I was reading this when my brain function wasn't the best. But there was a big twist coming. Well, not a twist, it's just one of the characters made a very big decision that impacted everybody and caused some characters to lose their lives. And it was shock value, it was shock. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't, and I was like fucking Joe from Friends, like, holy shit, did this really happen? And yes it did. But I loved it. I loved that kind of hint and that fear for Ari in the present as a character. So yes, he's telling his story backwards to Eloine, who's an amazing character, by the way. But then you get that threat over him of, shit, is he going to get out of this? Is he going to get out of this situation somebody has put him in? And it was amazing. And then seeing that develop more as he goes through, and as Ari is still hunting for the ashram, for their original story, learning more, but you also learn that he's also there for another reason that wasn't really expressed in book 1, and you're like, holy shit, are you really going to do this? And then you start to see he's not just telling his story back to somebody else, he's living still his own story, and that is just perfection. That is absolutely fucking amazing, and I love the shit out of this, because decisions Ari in the present is making, you're like, holy shit. But then you look back to Ari in the past, like, actually that tracks with who he is, but also he's grown, so you can see him really weighing the decisions, not just making them willy-nilly, actually deciding, am I going to make this decision? Yes, I am going to do it, and he will live with the consequences for it, but also being clever enough to see him think about a way that he can get himself out of this situation, which I just loved. But let's go back to Ari in the past. Young Ari, who is full of hatred, full of revenge in his heart, is a know-it-all, a little bit of an ass, and I love the living shits out of him. I'm just him going through everything, and like I really feel in this, I connected far more with Ari in this book, because yes, he's a sullied in book 1, he's still a sullied. You show him really struggling in life, how a lot of poor people are in nowadays, how a lot of people are beaten down because of who they are. But this is really comes true in book 2. Because it's a consequence of what happened in book 1, but then the people who are also trying to harm him, and all he's doing is defending himself, and yet he keeps getting called and called and called upon by the master of the ashram, like, why did you do this? Well, because of this. And they're like, oh, and some of it obviously is Ari's own fault, because Ari's just a train wreck, guys. He just loves to cause havoc and blow shit up. But he also has a lot of enemies. And a lot of these enemies use the fact that he's sullied and use the fact that he is who he is, like trying to use it against him because they have influence and he doesn't. And that I love, like, it's a horrible dynamic, but it really made me kind of cheer for Arion in this, because he is so lowborn, so like the caste system in this world very much resembles Eastern Asian culture and resembles that kind of, you were lesser because you weren't born in the right place, where it shouldn't even be that. And it's an aspect of the story that just adds another layer. That it doesn't explore it so much so far, but it just adds another layer, especially to Ari's motivations, especially to his anger as well. And it's just so well done. And Ari, he gets up to mischief in this book. He really does. He makes a decision and it backfires. He made a mistake. And he then has to live with the consequences of that mistake. And watching that was just, oh, like, how are you going to deal with that? But then he had to leave the ashram for that point. Because he made a promise, and I will completely admit, I forgot this character existed. He appeared in book 1. Ari made a promise, and he had to fulfill it, and the promise came due early. So he had to leave, had to go fulfill it. But there was also the threat of the ashram over his head. Not the ashram. Yes, the ashram. No, it's the ashura and the ashram. There was also the threat of the ashram, of the masters, deciding to confide Ari to the Crow's Tower if he cannot control his bindings that he's learned. But he has to leave the ashram. And a lot of us may be thinking, but that's where he's meant to learn how to do it. Like Rishi Ibram, the best character. In that case, mentally unstable, love the living shits out of him. But you think, like, you really would think that this is where you need to learn how to control the bindings. But Rishi says no. In his roundabout mad kind of way, you need to go live first before you can then learn. And that is definitely true. So we're all feeling like that threat is over Ari, but then he has to leave. Like, oh my god, is he ever really going to learn how to do any of this? Because if not, he's then confided, and then he has to stay there for the rest of life. Obviously, we know, because of present Ari, he doesn't stay there for the rest of life, but it's still that kind of threat that's looming over us. And that storyline, I liked. It slightly went repetitive when he got to a certain city. I'm not going to say what. It just repeats a little bit what happened in book 1. I understand why Ari did it. I would have just liked a more of a clear, Ari is being coerced into doing this, without him knowing he was being coerced into doing this, to make me kind of believe, okay, this has got to happen for a reason, rather than it felt like we went backward for a little bit, which, to be honest, it's a minor critique. It was fine. I loved the ending of that sequence. Loved it. And then we get to the desert waste, and this is where Ari really grew as a character, and the world expanded. The world building is just phenomenal already, but already I felt the world stretch out even further, especially with the myths and the legends and the creatures Ari then came across, because he makes some friends. You learn this different culture that's going on here, and it's fascinating. But then the Doors of Midnight. I love this idea. I love the idea of stories here being told within this story. Felt more like they belonged, like they were there for a reason. And I have a feeling on a reread, possibly when book 3 is out and the first tale of the first arc of Ari is told, we can then look back and go, that connects to here. But I would also see that, because the author has said he'd like it to be quite a long series. Whether or not it'll end up being that, we don't know. I do hope so, because I'm a big fan. But even so, I think some like tales and connections you'll see in book 1 could also lead to like future books, and we don't know it yet. So sometimes going through and reading these small tales these characters tell within Ari's story feels a little bit slimy. It bogs the story down, but I do think they are there for a reason, because this story is about storytelling. It's about myths, it's about legends, it's about how they carry things across through time, how people remember them, how it's the people who would tell the story and it weren't written down on paper that would get remembered more. And it's like the art of storytelling in itself, and it's just I just love it. Daphne, leave the chicken alone. But in the last section of Ari's story, we really get to delve deep into the decisions he would make for other people to save them from consequences, but knowing that he will fall with the consequences and knowing what will happen to him. And that makes me just love me. Like, I want a friend like Ari, guys. I really do. Somebody who will make a decision that will really be impactful on his life to save me from dealing with the consequences. Give me that, because that really shows Ari is not just full of revenge. It's not. He actually has a heart, and he cares about people that he cares about so much, and it's incredible. It's amazing. It is amazing. And then the exploration on the magic system, which comes within the world building, expanding itself into these myths and legends, and how that threat, again, another threat over Ari's head, but he's talking himself out of it by telling a story. And these stories, I have a suspicion, are going to become so prevalent later on. I really do. I think they are going to insinuate something that Ari has been looking for all along. And I cannot wait to see if my suspicions right. But the prose, again, as always, is masterful. The world building just went up a notch. And then Ari's characterization just grew deeper and more meaningful, and it was just amazing, especially between the past and the present. Those are my thoughts, spoiler free, on the Doors of Midnight. It came out on the 13th of August. Everybody needs to go pick this shit up, because it is such a beautiful tale that more people need to experience in and of itself. So those are my thoughts. It was an incredible book. I cannot wait to do a reread of it when I have my physical copy. I thank you, Netgalley and the publishers, for running the arc of this. I literally lost my shit when I got approved for this. And let me know if you've read the first binding. Comment down below and let's have a discussion about this. Are you going to read Doors of Midnight? Are you even going to pick up the first binding because of this? Let me know, and I will see you at the next one. So happy reading.